I am David Owen, Interim Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, and I welcome you to the 2021 Phi Beta Kappa Lecture, sponsored by the University of Louisville's College of Arts and Sciences and the Phi Beta Kappa Association of Kentuckiana. The College of Arts and Sciences has hosted a Phi Beta Kappa lecture each year since 2006. These lectures, by nationally prominent scholars and leaders, have all shared a commitment to the ideals of the Phi Beta Kappa Society, whose motto is, "Love of learning is the guide to life." The Phi Beta Kappa Society is committed to an education that fosters scientific inquiry, liberty of conscience, critical thinking, and creative endeavors, the very same values that are at the core of our College of Arts and Sciences. Now, I have the honor of introducing our university president, who is also the 2019 Phi Beta Kappa speaker, Dr. Neeli Bendapudi. Dr. Bendapudi was selected as the 18th president of the University of Louisville in April of 2018. As both the first woman and the first person of color to be named president of the University of Louisville, Dr. Bendapudi has energized the campus community, reminded us of our noble purpose, and placed a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion at the center of all we do. Under her bold leadership, the University of Louisville is making great strides towards becoming a great place for students to learn, a great place for employees to work, and a great place for the alumni and the community to invest. Dr. Bendapudi, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dino, and I appreciate those very, very kind words. And now, everybody, it is truly my honor to introduce our Phi Beta Kappa lecture tonight. The title is From A+ to F, How the Liberal Arts Led Me to Congress and Also Changed the World. Love the title, and I can't wait to hear more. And as you might have guessed, yes, we have a congressman here to speak to us, and it's Chairman John Yarmuth, who represents Kentucky's 3rd Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. Now in his 8th term, he has served as chairman of the House Budget Committee since 2019. Chairman Yarmuth has been recognized for his work to improve education, expand access to affordable healthcare, and to revitalize manufacturing here in Louisville. Born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, Yarmuth graduated from Atherton High School and Yale University. And I want to tell you that Congressman Yarmuth, 2 things about him that you may or may not find in his bio. One is that when it came to the university that truly is part of his heart, he decided that we would be the repository for his papers and not some other university that may have been mentioned. So we're very, very grateful for that trust, and we're eager to work with him. And then he holds many titles, including being a professor for us at the University of Louisville. Our students have the great honor from actually learning from Congressman Yarmuth. But I dare say that probably the title that's at the top of the many honors he's received is Grandpa to JD. So I wanted to say that to personalize this incredible individual and friend to me, friend to the university. So Chairman Yarmuth, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Neeli, and thanks to all of you for the great honor of inviting me to present this lecture. It was scheduled to be done a year ago, and I guess all things take time, but I never expected it to take this long, and I never thought that we would be doing it still virtually a year after the pandemic started, but that's what it is, and we're all getting used to it now. And I will say that the experience I've had teaching with Jasmine Ferrier in political science, course on Congress, it has been one of the great experiences of my life, and I hope to continue doing it. I love working with young people, and I'm so impressed with the caliber of the students in those classes, and I'll leave it at that. So here we go. A little more than a year ago, a woman named Betty Miles passed away. There was a brief obituary in the local paper, but nothing in it could have adequately reflected the lives she touched. For me, she was the answer to the question, which teacher had the greatest impact on your life? Betty Miles was my English teacher. For all 3 years I went to Atherton High School. She made me a much better writer. I'm sure we studied a great deal of literature in that class, but what I remember so vividly today is a paper that was returned with a grade of A+, and her comment that she was so proud of the improvement I had made in my writing. I didn't think all that much about it at the time, and even when I was exempted from freshman English at Yale based on my writing sample, I still didn't connect the dots. From then until today, those dots form an unmistakable trail back to her Dundee Road classroom. The ability to communicate effectively, both verbally and in writing, has essentially determined my life's trail. And of course, it's why I'm here tonight. I was a lucky kid in many ways. I had a strong, smart, loving parents, a solid middle-class upbringing, and 3 siblings with whom I almost always got along. I was also lucky to grow up in an era in which we had to find our own intellectual and recreational outlets. Way before video games, way before the internet, and way before the Disney Channel. In fact, we had cartoon shows only on Saturday mornings and at lunch weekdays on Wave TV in the Magic Forest. For many Louisvillians, that's an inside story. My mother, who was brilliant at every age, when she had a precious few minutes, was always reading. My father, too, in my earliest recollections, was a constant reader. So what was I to do when the cartoons weren't on? I read. Without much on TV, we also listened to a lot of music. Broadway soundtracks were always on in my house. And I learned that music was not just Elvis and Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello. Yeah, I'm showing my age, I understand that. Music could blend with interesting storytelling and dancing and produce some incredibly exciting entertainment. Well, I was not always an effective writer as a young guy. I was a voracious reader. Like many kids way back then, my first book was The Little Engine That Could. As I got a little bit older, I devoured the Chip Hilton series. This was a series of books about a high school multi-sports star. It was thrilling to turn those pages and visualize the last second basket, the 9th inning homer, or the game-winning touchdown pass. I read The Making of a President in 1960 by Theodore White, his trailblazing account of JFK's successful presidential campaign. At 15, I read one of the most provocative books I have ever read. It was called The Cardinal. And it was the story of a priest whose sister faced a pregnancy that would likely take her life, and the agony that priest went through as he counseled her in accordance with his faith. It most likely began my interest in difficult moral political dilemmas, of which we have many. About the same time, I read Advise and Consent, a novel by Alan Drury about the confirmation process of a Secretary of State nominee to be Secretary of State. And I was enthralled by Senate procedures and the way things could go very, very wrong. Those books and more I read because I wanted to, not because they were assigned to me in school. Like I said, I was lucky I had minimal options. So when I went off to Yale, I thought I wanted to focus on political science, but we had all sorts of requirements: foreign language, science, and the humanities. I hated that at the outset, but I eventually realized how important it was, especially when I decided that there weren't enough political science courses that interested me. A brief aside, one of my freshman year courses was philosophy, and I remember sitting in a window seat in my dorm room, struggling with Aristotle, ultimately getting so frustrated that I threw the book out the window and dropped the course the next day. Why would anyone start an introductory philosophy course with Aristotle? I have no idea. Much later, and still today, I've said that if I were to go back and do my undergraduate education, I would major in philosophy, but I would still skip Aristotle. So once I decided I couldn't major in political science, I became a history major. And when I couldn't find enough interesting history courses, I became an English major. And then I was a junior, and the only major I could pick that I could complete in 4 years was American Studies, which was the ultimate liberal arts major. Also a great major for playing Jeopardy. Once again, how lucky I was. I took American art history, American literature, economics, sociology, in addition to poli-sci and history, and they all counted toward my major. In my last year, we had a senior seminar, and while I can't remember the subject of the seminar, if there even was one, the purpose of the seminar was to produce a senior thesis that embodied multiple disciplines focused on an American topic. I decided to do mine on speculation in the 1920s. It comprised a wondrous blend of economics, politics, sociology, psychology, music, flappers, of course, all through a historical lens. What an incredible example of how so many liberal arts subjects not just came together, but imposed themselves on an important event in our country's development. It was the most academic fun I had at Yale and the best academic work I ever did. After graduating from Yale, I spent a lost year as a stockbroker. Not that there's anything wrong with being a stockbroker, but it wasn't something that interested me. And it did not let me employ any of the liberal arts education I had received. So when U.S. Senator Marlowe Cook invited me to join his staff in Washington, I leaped at the chance. And here's where things started to get interesting. My first week in DC was in February 1971. President Richard Nixon had just introduced an innovative program called revenue sharing, which was a program to give discretionary federal funding to the states. Cook asked me to write a floor speech for him on that Nixon initiative. I had not written a speech since I had run for student council president in 1964, but I did my best. I was on the floor for the speech, and afterward, Illinois Senator Chuck Percy came over to my boss and asked, "Did you get a new speechwriter? That was very impressive." Aside from the pride I felt and the realization that maybe I was a decent writer, I had quickly become Cook's primary writer. What did that mean? That I had to write about the economy and coal and farming and foreign policy and virtually every subject under the sun. So every day I used the same research and library skills I had acquired while writing my thesis. The liberal arts had struck again. It also meant that I had to think about my next career steps when I or my boss left the Senate. Turned out he had lost the next race, and I began to pursue an idea I had, which was to replicate the Washingtonian magazine, which I had read regularly while I was in DC. Eventually, I founded Louisville Today magazine in 1976, and I spent the next 5 years editing and writing the monthly. I wrote about art, politics, business, gasoline. I was particularly proud of that one. And I edited articles on fashion and music and education. And when I had to shut the magazine down in 1981, I ended up at the University of Louisville in charge of all external communications programs. What an experience that was. One day I would focus on athletics, next day on fine arts, next day on some scientific development or medicine or engineering or history. And I was in charge of UofL, the then university-owned classical music station, and I enhanced my knowledge of that genre. In short, I got a second education, on-the-job training in the liberal arts. When I left UofL, I got another opportunity to employ my growing liberal arts background. Our local cable system hired me to do a weekly public affairs talk show. And for 8 years, I talked to people from all walks of life. It definitely was not all about politics. Every week, it seemed like I was preparing for a different topic, and there never was a topic that didn't demand a liberal arts foundation in order for me to ask relevant and intelligent questions of the guests. During that time, I also founded the Louisville Eccentric Observer, the alternative newspaper that is still alive in its 31st year, and it is owned and directed by my son, Aaron. For 15 years, I wrote weekly columns, and as you would immediately surmise, my entire life before that is reflected in those writings, as well as in the publication itself. The point of all this reflection is not just to show how the liberal arts have not only infused, but essentially directed my career paths. My intent is to show the evolution of the candidate I presented to the people of the 3rd District in 2006. I was the embodiment of a liberal arts education, reinforced by certain presentation skills that I honed through many public appearances, TV and otherwise. Because even though I had no formal public speaking instruction, another liberal art, I'm sure my ability to communicate effectively to audiences large and small was an important element of my electoral success that year and since then. So that was my road to Congress. From that A+, and I should confess that was the only one I remember getting, to the F, which is the failing grade I get every year from the NRA, the National Rifle Association, for my gun voting record, and which I proudly display every year. And now in my 15th year in the House, I can say without hesitation or fear of contradiction that without the liberal arts, I might still be toiling away in that stockbroker job or something equally unsatisfying. Fortunately, the stars aligned in a more favorable direction. And now, well into my congressional career, I clearly understand how important a grounding in the liberal arts is to doing my job well. How could you intelligently discuss race without an understanding of history, religion, geography, economics, politics, even music and biology? How can you responsibly meet our healthcare challenges without having some exposure to ethics, in addition to economics, politics, sociology, and biology? You couldn't possibly understand the Middle East without economics, religion, history, politics, and geography. Take almost any issue before Congress, and the liberal arts are essential to an understanding of the complexities that need to be resolved. Believe me, I can tell within a few sentences of another member's arguments if they have a liberal arts background or something much more narrow. I'm asked frequently by students about what they should do if they want to prepare for a career in politics. I consistently and passionately advise them to take the broadest possible liberal arts curriculum. And I explain to them that they need to be prepared for a wide range of issues, and the liberal arts are the only way to do that. By the way, I also give that advice to anyone who wants to be a journalist. I say, don't go to journalism school. Focus on all the subjects you might be required to report on and write about. And yes, I realize I just ended a sentence with a preposition. I apologize for that. And one almost final thought. As chairman of the Budget Committee, I'm often called on to defend expenditures of one kind or another. Two of the frequent targets of federal spending are the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. Aside from the economic arguments I make that the arts and humanities are economic engines that across our country employ millions of Americans, I make a more spiritual and crucial point. The only things that have survived throughout the history of civilizations are the creations of the human mind. Think about it. Art, sculpture, literature, poetry, music, architecture survived for millennia. Blockbuster, Radio Shack, and Toys R Us are long gone. The liberal arts are the studies of what it means to be human, and ultimately, what is more important than that? As a matter of fact, maybe we should rename the liberal arts the human sciences. That might be a little more accurate. My father only spent a year or two in college, and his view of education, sadly but understandably, was that if you couldn't make money from your education, it was a waste of time. He would always respond to my course selections by saying, how are you going to make money from that? Usually I didn't have an answer. Today, I would. And actually, in today's fast-changing world, with the unimaginable impact of artificial intelligence and other technologies that faces us, I could logically claim that finally, philosophy majors are going to be in high demand. Their time has come. Thank you very much.